Hi, this is Charlie from Rubech IT, and welcome to this Acumatica demonstration. Today we'll be taking a broad overview of the Acumatica system. We'll follow the system through the life cycle of a sales order, starting with the CRM module showing off our lead and opportunity management, followed by sales order creation, inventory and stock item management, sourcing in manufacturing and purchasing, and finishing with a brief section on accounts receivable.
We're going to start with, in our traditional manufacturing flow, if you were to use a CRM in the system, some people want to use a CRM as a phase one whenever they first start going with the Acumatica. Some people, they say, you know what, I don't want to use it today. That's going to be something that's phase two that you add it on down the road. It is all still the same code base inside of Acumatica, but once people start to see the value in using quotes and opportunities inside of Acumatica, they're like, let's just bring it into phase one, especially when you say I could access it on my phone. So I could literally create a quote from my phone. I could literally be inside of a customer and be listening to them and at least create an opportunity. So within Acumatica, there's two main modules or workspaces that you're going to see inside of the CRM: marketing and then opportunities. Marketing, I can create dynamic lists. I can bring in prospects. I can create mass mails all out of Acumatica. Okay. Opportunities is what you think of traditionally with your CRM. An opportunity is going to be, I'm going to drill into another dashboard here, but an opportunity is a revenue generating record is what it is. I might have quoted it, I might not, but at least I'm talking to somebody and I know that I want to document that I'm talking to this person and there could be business down the road. Right. So if I drill into opportunities, I'm going to see, again, I can't attach stuff. I can't attach items. I can't attach a customer RFP to a record. I could go into this and attach notes. I can also bring in Outlook and or Gmail and integrate Acumatica to my email. So if I'm sending emails, I could send them from Acumatica. They're going to be stored as an activity. If the customer sends me an email, I could integrate Acumatica with my Outlook and bring that email into the system. So it's going to be stored into Acumatica for me. That allows me to do more reporting. It allows me to create follow-up tasks, if you will. So if you're trying to work something through your traditional order flow or funnel, sales funnel, coming from prospect down to win, I want to be able to create follow-up activities for me, for my sales team, right? This is core to the Acumatica CRM. As I'm moving a stage or I'm moving an opportunity through a stage, I'm also proportionately weighting that opportunity for my sales forecast. So if I'm in proof, say I'm 60% of the way done, and that's all tables that you can configure to your business. So if I'm at proof and that means 80% to me, then great. You just set that part up into the system. It's going to proportionally weight my revenue total to my weighted percentage and give me a forecasted total. That allows me to do some type of GI reporting, generic inquiry reporting, or dashboard reporting. Right. So now I can see, well, where I'm at for the month, where am I at for the year, from an individual salesperson perspective or from an overall entity perspective. So an opportunity, as I mentioned, is going to be that revenue generating document or record. What it may be is just a list of stuff that I'm talking to a prospect or a customer about. Right? I can have a contact I can have that's stored in the system. That contact might move into a prospect if I've never done business with them, or obviously if they're a repeat customer, they'd be listed as a customer in the system. I have the ability to export data and natively just pump data into the system using Acumatica platform. So that's what this up arrow is, right? I don't have to do any development to import records onto this screen. So if I have quoted them, I'm going to see the quote in the system. A quote can be revised. I can copy and create new revisions of a quote, or an opportunity might just be a list of parts. So that's where it could be quoted, but it doesn't have to be quoted inside of the CRM. So if I have a quote inside of Acumatica, I can create a sales order from that quote, right? I can win it, I can lose it, I can suspend it. But if I did win the business, or when I win the business, I can convert it. So I'm not re-entering information. Right? That's a huge time saver. It also allows me to reduce the error from quote to sales order as far as typing in the wrong price, typing in the wrong items, typing in the wrong whatever into the system. Right. If I had some documents that were in play during that opportunity and I needed to move them over to the sales order, you have the ability to do that as well. But if I wanted to attach my customer PO to a sales order, I could just drag and drop that customer purchase order onto that sales order. So now if someone asked me, well, what did they buy? What were their terms? What was any specifics to that to the client? You have the ability to access that specific purchase order, right? Their purchase order. You also have the ability to access that purchase order on your phone. Right? It's again, same platform. So if I have a sales order, I can open up the attachments on my phone as well. When you're talking about it from a sales perspective, the biggest risk you have is going to be all of the information and all the work you need to be doing, right? So how am I generating business for the company? So organization is a huge risk when you're talking from a sales perspective. Ask the guys that are on the phone, they'll tell you. So if you don't know what you're supposed to be working on or when you're supposed to be following up, good luck moving an opportunity into a funnel, right? So if you need to know who you're working with, you have the ability to store contacts inside of Acumatica. And again, if you're using the Outlook plugin, you could create contacts from that Outlook plugin just from an email that is in your inbox, right? So just trying to create and reduce the amount of redundant entry into the system. So when we move on from a quote, we win a quote, we move it on into an order, then you're going to be able to track how am I doing from a sales perspective, right? So where am I at for my quota on a per person basis or overall sales to budget kind of thing. I have the ability to track that information. And then when we start talking about actually taking a prospect and moving them into a customer, now we're talking about some additional information, more financial related. I need to be able to store. So just wanted to give you a quick overview. If I mentioned that if they're a customer, they're going to show inside of Acumatica as a customer. If you've never done business with them, they're going to show you. The system's going to recognize that and show as a prospect. When they become a customer, then I need to be able to put them what type of terms are they going to be set under? Are they good? Do we do a credit check? Do we want to attach the credit information to that client? Again, you can use attachments and attach information into the system. Excuse me. If we have any certain or special conditions worked out for them, you could put that into the system, right? So I want to go ahead and enter as much data into Acumatica that will help me do business down the road. So where am I going to send their bill? Do I have multiple locations that I need to ship to? How are they going to pay? Right? Just setting up that customer, but trying to do it in more compared to your legacy systems in a deeper, more thorough manner. Right? Because every field that's accessible inside of Acumatica, I can drive a workflow off of it, or I could drive a trigger off of it, right? So it's not just data and text anymore. Every field, because the platform is the way Acumatica developed it, it's all dynamic, right? So I can make every field a condition if I want to. So when we have the customer set up, we're going to move into an order. So just as an example, I'm going to bring up an order. So I could have a purchase order come in. That purchase order could come straight from an email on a purchase order, or it could come from a quote that I convert, right? If I wanted to copy a quote, if I didn't have the CRM, I could still copy it, right? Standard copy paste functionality inside of the platform. If you wanted to manually enter one, or again, that functionality as far as export and then import. So if somebody sends you a 50-line Excel document and you want to bring that in as a sales order, you can. No code, right? So a sales order, all this is going to be my revenue generating backlog, right? I'm not necessarily creating revenue because I haven't made the product yet. I haven't shipped it. However, I can create a payment or a prepayment against the order. So if you've got a risky customer that's a bad paying customer or COD, or it's a first time customer or a large order and you want to take a down payment, you can create multiple payments against one record. Right. So that's gonna, and a lot of the times companies that we see in the industry, they'll have a separate spreadsheet that they're tracking all of their down payments. And then whenever they go to ship it, then they have to do some manipulation behind on the GL to make all the numbers work. So Acumatica, if you have a prepayment, it's going to do that accounting for you, and then when you do your final shipment, it's going to reconcile those transactions. So you don't need an extra spreadsheet to manage that information. All right, so if we wanted to integrate Acumatica with FedEx or UPS, you can do some LTL as well, but Acumatica does have integration capabilities to UPS and FedEx. So you have the ability to bring a tracking number back into the system automatically. And then because of Acumatica's platform, I could automatically email that tracking number to the customer from within Acumatica. I don't have to go to another system to do it. Right. So thank you, Mr. or Miss Customer. Your shipment is on its way. Here's the tracking number. Yada, yada, yada. Thank you for your business. So that's standard functionality inside of Acumatica. So you notice that I've got these green boxes. Acumatica prompts you for the next logical process automatically. And pending security, because I'm the administrator or set up as an administrator in my instance, I could literally take a sales order from this one screen. I could create a shipment, I could create an invoice, I could do the whole thing, and it's going to prompt me all along the way. So you'll notice that because I have a sales order, the next logical step, if I had some in stock, would be to ship it. And then when I'm in a shipment, the next logical step would be to create the invoice. So you'll see that that's just standard 1 step, 2 step, 3 step, just boom, boom, boom. Gonna pivot over to inventory. And then from an inventory perspective, you have stock items and non-stock items, right? So that's really your two big categories of inventory inside of the system. And I mentioned warehouses and that sort of thing. We'll dive into deeper look into inventory here in just a moment. Non-stock items are going to be like boxes and overhead consumable type of stuff that you need to purchase it, but I don't want to inventory it, right? From an inventory standpoint, again, you have to put a class beside it. Every class that you put onto your item, it's going to automatically populate your GL accounts. You're also going to be able to set your valuation method, your cost in the items, or if I need to track specific per lot number or serial number, I have the ability to track specific valuation methods per class if you want to. If you're using standard cost, it's going to track your last cost and your current cost. And if you want to do a roll, you can do a standard cost roll. But for manufacturers, what they really care about is, how do I know when I need to make my stuff? That's normally the big question. So how do I know I need to make it? How do I know I need to buy it? Right. So from an inventory perspective, I can either set my items as purchased or made. And then how am I going to reorder them, or how am I going to make them? So from a manufacturing perspective, if I need to make a minimum of 100 pieces in order to put on the shelf, I have a lot size. And then if I need to have set the system to give me a prompt when I hit a certain level, I have that my reorder point, right? So that's what I could override this on an overall level per item, or if I could do it per warehouse if I want to. So from a purchasing perspective, if I can buy raw material from multiple vendors, I have the ability to store multiple vendors in the system with their information as far as what is the minimum quantity that I need to buy or what is the lead time, as well as their part number. So if I wanted to put my vendor's part number in the system, I have the ability to print their part number in the system as well as search for it. And then if I'm going to buy that from 5 different people, each time I print a PO, I could have the vendor specific part number on their purchase order. Now, from a manufacturing standpoint, we're going to talk about bills of materials next. All right, so you'll see on the screen here, I have a default bill of material and a planning bill of material. A planning bill of material can be used if I need to get long lead raw material on order before I actually have either a finished bill of material made, or I would just prefer to use a different bill of material in order to do some of my purchase planning or my forecasting, if you will. When you have a bill of material record populated as a planning BOM, Acumatica will use the planning BOM when you're running through your MRP. And I'll show you in material resource planning. I'll show you what that engine does in a minute. From a manufacturing standpoint, I'm going to be using my default BOM. So a bill of material inside of Acumatica houses a few different components. It houses your labor. So how much time is it going to take me to make this record? Oh, hang on, let me reload it. So how much labor, how much runtime is it going to take me to run an operation? A bill of material in Acumatica will also house your materials as well as your subcomponents or your outside processes. Whenever I'm looking at my labor, so if I have labor, materials, and subcontracting, what goes along with my labor is going to be my overhead, right? So you have the ability to have different types of overhead that can be charged to the work order when you allocate labor to the work order, right? So if I have, I want to charge regular floor overhead whenever I'm working on assembly, but if I do something else, like maybe a final assembly, I also want to charge some administrative overhead, right? So you have the ability per work center and operation to charge different types of overhead. All that's doing is helping you accurately cost your product, right? So from a labor standpoint, you have your setup time and your run time. And then from a material standpoint, I'm going to have quantities, right? So how much of each quantity of material do I need in order to make that parent, right? So I could have a multi-level bill of material, excuse me, all on one screen that shows me everything there is to know about that product, going down to the lowest level, including outside processing, including overhead, including labor, including material. It's all on one record, one comprehensive record. So if I were to want to look at this bill of material in just a single level instance, I could see that this bill of material, record number 5, has 2 operations, and then I have 5 materials. Some of these materials also have other materials, so they're a subassembly in their own right. That's why when I look at the workbench, you'll see some indented structure, right? It's not just one level deep. So you have the ability to go as many levels deep as you need to inside of Acumatica. So there are integrations to Acumatica and SolidWorks. If you want to import your bill of materials from SolidWorks into Acumatica, there are a few different ways to go about doing that. Some are using a third-party product that SE can follow up with you on. If you wanted to integrate Acumatica to your SolidWorks CAD system, or you could do just an export to like a CSV file and then an import into Acumatica. You'll notice that little import function is, again, standard on these screens. Mm-hmm. So I mentioned MRP, material resource planning. So material requirements planning. So MRP is an engine that can run in the background. So if I look at this regenerate MRP, you'll notice that it's inside of a process menu. So if I look at regenerate MRP, I could run this manually by clicking process, and the system's going to go through all of my supply and demand requirements down to the lowest level in one pass. I could also schedule this on a clock or I could create a schedule and put regenerate MRP to run for me unattended. So anything inside of a process, I could put on a schedule. And so let's say at 2 a.m., I'm going to run through the engine. I'm going to set the engine to run. And then whenever I come in at 6, 7, 8 o'clock, whatever, or whenever I open up my MRP display, it's going to show me all of the items that I need to make and I need to buy based on my settings. So based on my reorder points or my order quantities or my purchase orders and sales orders and other work orders that are out there, I'm going to have one view and I'm going to know where my driver is coming from, and it's going to tell me why I need it. The system's telling me I need to make it or I need to buy it, right? So you'll see this type. So say, well, all of your sales orders are driving demand. If I don't have enough, Acumatica is going to tell me I need to make more. Or I have a work order and it's going to drive my raw material to zero. So Acumatica is going to tell me I need to buy more. That's what the MRP display does. Right. So Acumatica is going to look at the lowest level raw material and it's going to tell me on an MRP display, or if I have existing sales orders, or I'm sorry, existing work orders or purchase orders that are out there and they're late or I need to do something with them, I have a screen called MRP exceptions, and now I'll be able to take action on dead demand, or let's say a purchase order is late, so I need to do something with it. I mentioned generic inquiries. Well, I have the ability to take this information and put it on dashboards. So whenever a purchasing person comes in or a manufacturing person comes in, they can see that they've got orders that are late and or purchase orders that are behind that's going to cause work orders that are late. And now I know I can be more proactive and do something with them, right? Or maybe I had some specific materials that I was buying for an order and that order got pushed. Well, that impacts my purchase order. Therefore, I need to call my vendor and have them slide that material delivery out so I don't pay for it or it doesn't sit around too soon. So once I make my work orders, I go into what's called a planned state. So Acumatica can create work orders well in advance, but not release them to the floor. Or if you just want to create work orders and automatically release them, you can set the system to do either. Whenever I create a work order and I want to release it, all I'm doing is I'm telling the shop or I'm telling production that, hey, this one's good to go. This one's ready to be worked on. Traditionally, if I have a planned order, that means it's firm, but I'm not ready to start working on it yet. I'm not ready to show the shop that I have that work order coming. And that's what a planned order means. But whenever I create a work order inside of Acumatica, I'm taking a snapshot of a bill of material. And again, I'm going to use a work order to aggregate my labor time, my labor dollars, if I have machine information, but more specifically material, overhead, outside processes, to give me a good, accurate cost of production. So from a work order perspective, a work order or a production order, traveler, whatever you want to call it, you have the ability to create 1D barcodes or 2D barcodes. And then if you wanted your employees to scan to clock into a work order, or if you wanted to automatically charge labor and use what's called backflushing, you have the ability to do either. Right. So if I had a computer on the shop floor, I could have my employees scan, which would clock into a work order. That's going to cost, or that's going to track either a standard labor rate or it can track their employee labor rate back to that work order. And I mentioned overhead. So whenever I clock and or scan work on from an employee perspective, I'm going to track labor and overhead. So when we talk about MRP and from a purchasing perspective, if I wanted to put recommended buys onto a dashboard, and so when a purchasing person comes in, they can just come on their dashboard and see that data, you can do that, right? So like this example is a purchasing suggestion. Here's a purchasing suggestion generic inquiry. I need to drill into it, and it's telling me, hey, you need to do something about these parts. And the reason is I'm short, right? Or I've hit my reorder point, or it's a custom order and somebody on a sales order is telling me I need to buy something. So again, go back to my dashboard to drive purchasing, to manage my open purchase orders, items that I haven't purchased yet, but the system thinks I need to, late purchase orders, maybe vendors that are causing problems that I don't want to pay, whatever the issue is. You have the ability to put a dashboard for that buyer. And similar to customers, on my vendors, I have a class, and then I could have information populate on my purchasing dashboard or my AP dashboard based on whatever information or whatever's going on with my vendors, right? So if I have multiple contacts, or what are my purchasing settings, like standard shipping information that I want to bring onto a purchase order, I have the ability to store that data and then do something with it. If I were to go into a purchase order, again, you'll notice that export or import. So if I had a bunch of lines for some reason in Excel and I wanted to buy them, I could just import them straight onto this this screen here, this PO document. Something else that Acumatica has, I mentioned workflows earlier. So I think the purchasing process is a pretty good example of how you could use workflows. So you'll notice that this purchase order has been approved already. So depending on who you want to create purchase orders, you have the ability to set the system to not allow them to email them, or not allow them to print, or not allow them to do anything with the purchase order unless it's been approved. And it can be a single step approval or multiple step approval. Right? I mean, you could build a workflow that's pretty comprehensive. Again, no development is required. You need to learn the system a little bit, but you can tell the system and create your own workflows. You don't need to be an expert in developing and code in order to create a workflow in the system. All right. So once something's been approved, then I can print or I can email it. Again, you notice that some of this is some of the menu items are grayed out just because of my configuration to that vendor. And then Acumatica is telling me the next logical step. Once I create a purchase order, the next logical step is going to be to enter a purchase order receipt. Mm-hmm. So if I was a receiving clerk, I would have that information on my dashboard. But if I wanted just to drill in to that purchase order and create a receipt, I could. And I mentioned warehouses earlier. So you can store multiple warehouses inside of Acumatica. And then within the warehouse, you can store locations or bins, right? Specific racks or shelves inside of the system. So you know where that product is when you need to go use it. So you have the ability to create lot numbers or serial numbers based on part number. You can configure this. You have certain parts that need to store serial numbers and others that need to store lots and others that don't need to do either. You can configure the system to behave how you need it to behave.
Okay.
And then you can either manually enter a lot number or serial, or you can tell the system to automatically generate those. Excuse me. So whenever I do a purchase receipt, I can either automatically create the bill, or if I wanted this information to go into an accrual state, I don't have to create the bill, and this is configured by the user, right? So you don't have to uncheck it every time, and you have the ability to go into an I call it AP accrual or an accrual account or unvouchered account whenever I do my receipt. It's going to be able to create inventory, and or if they're non-stock items, then I'm going to be going off of the GL account for that non-stock item. Again, I mentioned like those overhead type of goods, not inventory. And then it's going to follow the same logical rules that I've set up in the system to either create an invoice or create the bill or go into that account and wait for the invoice to come in. So from the AP side of things, once you have, this is a different looking view, just as in some examples, but once you have those uh, receipts that have come in, they're going to be sitting in that unvouchered account. So you're going to be able to run an aging off of those items versus your trade payables as well. So if I were to go into, a document that's already been created. One thing I should mention is the system has the ability. I mentioned earlier that Outlook integration. Acumatica does have the ability to scan an email address, and when a vendor sends an invoice to you, it can scan that email address and book your entry automatically. So if it sees that the vendor exists, it's a matched vendor, the items either from a cross reference or from your part number exist, and you've got a purchase receipt that's sitting in the system, it will do that match and it will book that entry automatically, which is a huge time saver for our customers. It's one of the biggest reasons why they're using Acumatica is because of the ability just to match those invoices. So one thing that I mentioned earlier as far as those processes, so anytime you see a process, you can put the system on a schedule, right? So if I have a process like AP document recognition is going to bring in all of those invoices and book them for me, and I need to prepare payments on a schedule, you can set the system to not necessarily pay your vendors automatically, but I want to create a schedule so I come in and I have a dashboard and I have the ability to say, okay, these are all the documents that are within a threshold that I need to go ahead and get out the door for whatever reason. It's I get a discount, right, or whatever, and I want to pay those vendors within 10 days. So you could set the system to create a schedule, and then the conditions when met will move those records into a prepared state. Then now I just need to come in and say, okay, yeah, those look good. Those look good. Let's pay those. These don't. Let's reject those and put them back into a pending state. If I were to go back to that sales order that I had earlier, and I mentioned Acumatica is telling me my next logical step is to create a shipment, right? So if I were to create a shipment, or if I were to come into a shipping dashboard and drill into the record that I need to ship, if I've got the available inventory, Acumatica is going to let me ship it, right? If you don't have the available inventory, you can put that information on the dashboard and saying, hey, you've got a shipment, but you're behind schedule on these products, and this is where the product is right now. Or you've got shipments coming up, they're not yet overdue, and this is where your quantity sits, and maybe I could ship ahead, or maybe I just need to start asking some questions to make sure that we change our production schedule around so we don't miss shipping dates. So when I confirm the shipment, if I pass rules, right? So maybe my rules are not just around quantity, but maybe my rules are going to be around do a check on the customer to make sure they're not late on any other orders. And I don't want to ship this out if they're late, or I need to go get special approval, right? That's why I have to run this shipment, and I ran it through a process is what I did manually, because I want to demonstrate that the system can be configured inside of that process to do your business process, not just a system process. Notice this prepare invoice. Well, this is on a one by one basis, the same menu that I have down here, right? So a process, I need to process orders, or I need to process shipments, or I need to create an invoice, right? It's the same thing. I'm just doing it on a one by one basis. Sorry. So that's the same. If I were to come in here and then prepare this invoice, I could prepare invoice on an automation schedule. And so anything that ships, I could bring it into a pending invoice state. And then I just might want to review it before I post, or I want to manually come in here and process my invoices and then look at them. All right. So once we get those invoices out, now we're on the AR side of things. Acumatica does have an integration to banks. I think there's 14,000 institutions that Acumatica can integrate with to date, which would allow you to automatically know if you receive ACH payments from your customers, Acumatica could automatically know or alert you that, hey, you've gotten some deposits, and then we need to sync those up and match them to our invoices. All right, so similar to like AP doc recognition, your bank feeds integration with Acumatica would allow you to streamline your bank reconciliation process. If you're receiving checks in the mail and you need to match those checks up and apply a payment, you can do so manually as well. Right. So you can still just do your good old fashioned payment application to a receivable, two invoices or multiple invoices, and then book those entries in the system.
Thank you so much for joining us today. If you're interested in learning more about what Acumatica and Rubech IT can do for your business, please email us at contact@rubech.tech for a free consultation or demonstration, and scan the QR code on screen to follow us on all our socials. Thank you again, and have a great day.